In our last story, we closed the book on the era of the judges, a dark and chaotic time when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Now, as the nation stands at a crossroads, a new chapter begins, a time of transition where the final judge will anoint the first king. This is the story of that transition, a story of desperate prayer, tragic failure, and the search for a leader for God's people. It begins not on a battlefield, but in the quiet grief of a woman's heart. A man named Elkanah had two wives. One, Peninnah, had given him many children. The other, Hannah, was barren. Every year when the family went to Shiloh to worship, Peninnah would torment Hannah, mocking her childlessness until she would weep and refuse to eat. Her husband Elkanah, though he loved her deeply, could not understand her pain. "Hannah," he would say, "why are you crying? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" But Hannah's ache was for a child. One year, in bitterness of soul, she went to the temple and poured out her heart to God. She wept so intensely, making a silent vow, that Eli the priest, watching her lips move without a sound, assumed she was drunk. "How long will you carry on like this?" he demanded. "Sober up." "No, my lord," Hannah answered, her voice full of sorrow. "I am not drunk. I am a woman deeply troubled, and I have been pouring out my soul to the Lord." Moved by her sincerity, Eli blessed her, saying, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." A peace settled over Hannah. She went and ate, and her face was no longer sad. In due time the Lord remembered her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and she named him Samuel, which means asked of God. Hannah did not forget her promise. When the boy was weaned, she brought him back to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. She found Eli and said, "My Lord, I am the woman who stood here praying. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted my petition. Now I give him back to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And there in the temple a new voice began to serve God, the young boy Samuel, but he was serving in a house filled with corruption. Eli's own sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were wicked men who had no regard for the Lord. They treated the Lord's sacrifices with contempt, using their priestly authority to steal the best cuts of meat for themselves before it was offered to God. They sinned so grievously that people began to despise the offering of the Lord. Eli rebuked them, but his words were weak, and his sons paid him no mind. A man of God came and delivered a terrible prophecy. Eli's house would be cut off from the priesthood, and both his sons would die on the same day. In these days the word of the Lord was rare. One night, as old Eli slept and his eyes were failing, Samuel lay down in the temple near the ark of God. A voice called out, "Samuel." The boy ran to Eli, saying, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." This happened a second time. The third time the Lord called, Eli finally perceived that it was God calling the child. He told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down. And the Lord came and called as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel answered, "Speak, for your servant is listening." God then gave the young boy a terrifying message. The judgment he had spoken against Eli's house was about to be fulfilled, a judgment so shocking it would make the ears of all who heard it tingle. The next morning Samuel was afraid to tell Eli the vision. But Eli insisted, "What was it he said to you? Do not hide it from me." So Samuel told him everything, and Eli, resigned to his fate, said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him. All of Israel, from one end of the land to the other, recognized that Samuel was a true prophet of the Lord. The prophecy against Eli's house came to pass in a great national tragedy. Israel went to war against their old enemy, the Philistines, and were badly beaten. In desperation, the elders had a foolish idea. "Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh into our camp," they said. "It will save us." They believed the sacred object held a magic power. When the ark, accompanied by Hophni and Phinehas, arrived in the camp, the Israelites let out a shout so mighty the ground shook. The Philistines were terrified. "A god has come into their camp," they cried. But their fear turned to resolve. "Be strong men," they urged one another. "Fight like men, or we will become their slaves." The Philistines fought, and Israel was utterly routed. 30,000 foot soldiers fell. Hophni and Phinehas were killed, and the unthinkable happened. The ark of God was captured. A messenger ran to Shiloh, his clothes torn. Eli, now 98 years old and blind, sat by the road, his heart trembling for the ark of God. The messenger rushed in and delivered the news in 4 staggering blows. "Israel has fled. There has been a great slaughter. Your 2 sons are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward from his chair by the gate. His neck was broken, and he died. The tragic news continued to spread. His daughter-in-law, Phinehas's wife, went into labor upon hearing it. As she died giving birth to a son, she named him Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God had been taken." The Philistines, triumphant, took the ark to their city of Ashdod and placed it in the temple of their god, Dagon. The next morning, they found the statue of Dagon had fallen on its face before the ark. They set it back up. But on the morning after that, Dagon had fallen again. This time, his head and hands were broken off. The hand of the Lord then fell heavily upon the city. He afflicted the people with a plague of tumors. In a panic, they sent the ark to another city, Gath, but the same plague broke out there. They sent it to Ekron, and the people cried out, "They've brought the ark here to kill us too." After 7 months of plague and death, the Philistine lords consulted their priests. "What shall we do with the ark?" The priests devised a plan. They would return the ark on a new cart, pulled by 2 cows that had never been yoked, whose calves were left behind. They would also send a guilt offering of 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. "If the cows go straight toward Israel," they reasoned, "then we will know this plague is from their God. If not, it was just chance." The men did so, and the cows, lowing for their calves, took the straight road to the Israelite town of Beth-Shemesh, never turning aside. The people of Beth-Shemesh rejoiced to see the ark, but their joy turned to mourning. In a fatal act of irreverence, some of the men looked inside the ark, and the Lord struck down 70 of them. A great fear fell on them. "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God?" they cried. The ark was then taken to the house of Abinadab in Kiriath Jearim, where it would remain for 20 long years. After those years, Samuel, now the judge of Israel, called the people to Mizpeh. "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts," he said, "then rid yourselves of your foreign gods and serve the Lord only." The people obeyed, fasting and confessing their sins. But when the Philistines heard Israel was gathered, they marched to attack. The Israelites were terrified and begged Samuel to pray for them. As Samuel was sacrificing a lamb, the Lord thundered with a loud thunder over the Philistines, throwing them into such confusion that Israel routed them completely. Samuel set up a stone and called it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." For the rest of Samuel's days, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. But when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges, and they were corrupt. They took bribes and perverted justice. The elders of Israel saw this and came to Samuel with a momentous demand. "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." The request displeased Samuel, and he prayed to the Lord. God's response was heartbreaking. "Listen to them," he said. "It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." He told Samuel to solemnly warn the people what having a king would really mean. Samuel delivered the warning. "A king," he said, "will take your sons for his army and your daughters for his household. He will take your fields, your vineyards, and a tenth of your grain and your flocks. You yourselves will become his servants." "And when that day comes," Samuel warned, "you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you." But the people refused to listen. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." The Lord instructed Samuel to give them their king. The story of Israel's first king begins with lost donkeys. A man named Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin, had a son named Saul, a handsome young man who stood a head taller than anyone else. When Kish's donkeys wandered off, he sent Saul to find them. After a long, fruitless search, Saul's servant suggested they consult the man of God who lived nearby, Samuel. This was no chance encounter. The day before, God had told Samuel, "About this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel." When Samuel saw Saul approaching, the Lord said to him, "This is the man I spoke to you about." Samuel welcomed Saul, honored him with the chief seat at a feast, and told him not to worry about the donkeys, for they had been found. "And on whom is all the desire of Israel?" Samuel asked, "if not on you and all your father's house?" The next morning, as they were leaving, Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it on Saul's head. He anointed him captain over God's inheritance and gave him a series of signs that would confirm his calling. Everything happened just as Samuel had said. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon Saul, and he prophesied with a band of prophets, astonishing those who knew him. Samuel then gathered all of Israel to publicly select the king by lot. The lot fell to the tribe of Benjamin, then to the family of Matri, and finally to Saul, son of Kish. But when they looked for him, he was nowhere to be found. He had hidden himself among the supplies. They brought him out, and when he stood among the people, he was a head taller than anyone else. Samuel presented him. "Do you see the man the Lord has chosen? There is no one like him among all the people." And the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Saul's kingship was soon tested. An Ammonite king besieged the Israelite city of Jabesh Gilead, offering a cruel ultimatum: surrender, and every man's right eye will be gouged out. When Saul heard the news, the Spirit of God came on him in power. He took a pair of oxen, cut them into pieces, and sent them throughout Israel with a message: "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Fear fell on the people, and they came out as one man. Saul led them in a surprise attack and annihilated the Ammonites. The victory solidified his rule, and all the people went to Gilgal and reaffirmed Saul as king before the Lord. There, Samuel gave his farewell address as judge. He challenged the people to find any fault in his leadership, and they could not. He recounted God's faithfulness and reminded them that asking for a king was a great wickedness in the Lord's sight. As a sign, he called on God to send thunder and rain during the dry wheat harvest. God did so, and the people were terrified. "Pray for us," they begged Samuel. "We have added to all our other sins the evil of asking for a king." Samuel promised to continue to pray for them, but ended with a stark warning: "If you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will be swept away." The warning would prove prophetic. Saul's reign, which began so promisingly, was soon marred by disobedience. Facing a massive Philistine army, Saul's own troops were trembling with fear. He was in Gilgal, under strict orders from Samuel to wait 7 days for him to arrive and offer sacrifices. But as the 7th day ended, and Samuel had not yet come, Saul's nerve broke. Seeing his men scattering, he took matters into his own hands and offered the burnt offering himself, a duty reserved for the priest. Just as he finished, Samuel arrived. "What have you done?" he demanded. Saul made excuses, blaming Samuel's delay and the people's fear. But Samuel's reply was devastating. "You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. The Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." The first crack in Saul's kingdom had appeared. Soon after, his own son Jonathan demonstrated the faith Saul lacked. With only his armor-bearer, Jonathan attacked a Philistine outpost, declaring, "Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." God honored his faith, sending an earthquake and throwing the Philistine camp into chaos. The Israelites routed their confused enemies. But in the heat of victory, Saul made another foolish error, placing the army under a rash oath. "Cursed be any man who eats food before evening comes." Jonathan, not hearing the oath, ate some wild honey and was refreshed. When Saul discovered this, he was prepared to execute his own son to uphold his foolish vow, but the soldiers intervened and rescued their hero. The final break came on a divine mission. Samuel delivered a direct command from God to Saul. "Go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys." Saul obeyed, but only in part. He defeated the Amalekites, but spared their king, Agag. And he and his soldiers kept the best of the sheep and cattle, destroying only what was worthless. Then the word of the Lord came to a grieving Samuel. "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commands." When Samuel confronted Saul, Saul greeted him cheerfully. "I have carried out the Lord's command." "What then?" Samuel replied. "Is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul blamed the soldiers. "They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God," he said. It was then that Samuel spoke the timeless words that sealed Saul's fate. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. In desperation, Saul confessed, "I have sinned. I was afraid of the people, so I gave in to them." He grabbed for Samuel's robe as the prophet turned to leave, and the cloth tore. "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day," Samuel declared, "and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you." Samuel and Saul parted ways that day, never to see each other again. Samuel mourned for the king he had anointed, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. The search for a new king, a man after God's own heart, was about to begin,